Good afternoon, and thank you for taking time out of your day to join us. My name is Lori Drake, and I am the Building Blocks Community Manager here at Handle. For those that aren't familiar with Handle, we have a platform that is purposely built for building materials suppliers, focusing on lien rights management, waiver compliance, with a dedicated payment portal that accommodates everything from check by phone to wire transfers and credit cards. Today, we are joined by Alaina Worden. Alaina is Carson's team credit and collection manager. She has over 25 years of credit experience within the construction industry, trucking, and fuel industries, and specializes in building efficiencies within the credit workflow. Alaina is a frequent guest speaker at credit-focused professional conferences and is committed to mentoring the next generation of credit professionals. She earned her CCE from the National Association of Credit Management and currently serves as Vice Chair on the NACM Commercial Services Foundation Board and is President of the CFDD Portland Chapter Board. She's been recognized with a CFDD National Award, a National Distinguished Member Award, and is a Carson Circle of Excellence Award winner. Thank you for joining us today, Alaina.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be here. Good afternoon or morning, everyone, depending on where you are. It's still morning here on the West Coast. Let's go ahead and jump into this. So I do appreciate the interaction with this webinar. So please, if you have any questions as we go through it, go ahead and ask those questions and we can answer them as we go along. Sometimes it's easier to get the answers and dive into it a little deeper when we're sitting on that slide than to make a note and try to remember it at the end of the slide. You're going to break down building efficiencies in credit. My goal today is to help you understand kind of some different areas that you're able to potentially find some efficiencies that are going to work with you. I'm just going to move past this slide. So I like to do this presentation live because I really enjoy the interaction and being able to see everybody's faces and read body language. It makes it flow a little bit easier, but I've adapted to the new post-COVID way of doing these webinars. So although the slide is asking for, a show of hands, that's hard to do. What I've noticed though, over the years of doing this is that people that have credit and policies and procedures, it's usually about 50-75%. So they have the credit policy in place, but that they don't have the procedure in place. So really the difference between credit policies and procedures. So your credit policy is your set guideline that's used to determine like who are you going to extend credit to, where they're going to be payment terms for those parties, defining the limits, and how you're kind of establishing like the core of the process. The procedures is really the official way of doing it. How are you going to implement the policy, and what are the hands-on approach of doing that? So like I said, we can't really show hands here, but it's usually 50-75% have one or the other in place and not both. My assumption is that we're probably running into the same statistics with this group here, and I'm just going to kind of go through it as though maybe there's a vague policy in place and maybe some SOPs in place, but not a full picture here. And hopefully this will help you navigate that and kind of build some of those structures. So we're going to break down, where do we start with building those efficiencies? What data are we going to share? What are we trying to achieve? How often should we review the data that we're processing, and why is this important? So Walter McIntyre has, from Lean Mean Process Improvements, has this quote that I really enjoy. If managed properly, standardized work establishes a relationship between people and their work processes. This relationship can enhance ownership and pride in the quality of work performance, and the result is a higher morale and productivity. Again, when you're trying to streamline processes and build those efficiencies, productivity is key, and being able to lower the amount of minutes or seconds that it takes to do a job. And then that just helps to enhance kind of the next process moving through. So we're going to break down information that we're sharing, how we're sharing it, and who should write it. What information should be shared? So all processes, including managerial tasks should be shared. This is from receiving new credit applications, applying payments, and everything in between. When it comes to the credit procedures, everything should be documented and shared. Your how-to guides or your SOPs should be easily accessible by the team. You should be able to streamline it with the same consistent flow. I recommend that if your company has a marketing team, that you should check with them regarding fonts and colors, any kind of formatting restrictions. Again, you want this information to be able to carry on year over year and really kind of test or stand the test of time, so that you have this available and it's not having to be changed based on what the new, cool thing is to set it up as. Whatever is going on in the world, sometimes those fads come and go just as quickly as we set them up. And so really just finding something that works, that is going to stand that test of time. How we're sharing the information. We need to determine if you want an electronic version or paper copy or both. So I am in the Pacific Northwest and we love our paper mills out here. So I like paper copies, but I also know that in the post-COVID world, we are now dealing with remote workers, hybrid situations, and the need to be able to have stuff in an electronic format makes sense, so that the team is able to obtain that information. So I do both. We want the documents to be in a centralized location so that it's easily accessible by the credit team. Be sure that you're reviewing and updating as needed. So if you change a ERP system or you change a program for, processing credit cards, you want to make sure that you're updating that SOP to help with the changes. And then set a specific time frame on when you're going to review the process. So is it yearly, quarterly? The last thing you want to do is spend all this time and energy in putting together all of this information and then the material becomes outdated. So schedule yourself some time to be able to review it. I like to use my Outlook calendar as kind of my tickler file and my reminder. So I do view our credit policy once a year, and then I look at procedures typically on a semi-annual basis, just to make sure that no upgrades change the way we're doing the formatting of some of our things here at Carson.
No. I mean, I'm on there, I'm just not on video.
Next, you want to decide who should write the policies. So you need to think through, do you want to utilize your team, or is this something that you're going to take on independently? I highly recommend that you utilize your team to help you write your guides. You'll want to go through it to make sure that it's a streamlined process and that maybe some, shortcut that shouldn't be used isn't documented. I like to tell my team, when you're writing your guides, I want every keystroke written down. Assume that the end user knows absolutely nothing about your system and process. So none of that tribal knowledge should be left out. I'm talking about, like, if you need to hit enter 3 times to be able to get to the next screen, to add the data you want to write down, enter, 3 times to be able to get to the next phase of it. So you're going to think about it, you're going to write it, you're going to edit, you're going to polish it, and you're probably going to go through that step a couple of times, because it's interesting. As you've done a process for a long time and maybe you've never documented it before, when you start documenting it, it's pretty rough in the beginning. Rough being like a rough draft, because so much information, tribal knowledge kind of kicks in and you forget to write down those steps. So one thing that you can do is utilize somebody who doesn't normally do that and see if they're able to go through the process with what you have written out. And that will help flush out some of the issues that come up where the tribal information, if you will, has completely taken over, what that looks like. And then choosing the format. So again, making sure that you choose the format that's right for your company. This is an image of the format that I use here, and I've actually incorporated this format the last couple of companies that I've worked for. So pretty self-explanatory here, but I'll just break it down a little bit here. So finding for us, it's, the department that's in charge, who's the policy owner, and the date of last revision. So if you're even making a correction on a spelling change or, one small change, make sure that you're updating your current date, and then that information is getting distributed. So it's getting saved in the electronic version. And then if you're giving out paper copies to everybody, that they get an updated paper copy changed again. So everybody's working off of the most current SOP or how-to guide. Then I like to break down the purpose. So the section that should include why are you writing the guide and what's the user going to get out of it. And then the overview and definition is going to include the step-by-step on how to complete the task, along with any pertinent information that goes in there. And then this is just the sample that I use. So we'll talk about this a little bit later on in the slides, but this section here, the header and what the company logo is and the fonts, I have it all written down. So if somebody else is coming in new and is helping to write the SOP, they know exactly the format that we need to use to be able to keep our material consistent. The next step in putting this together is deciding on a naming convention. So how to run a credit card or how to post a payment adds additional layers in the naming convention. As you can see over here in the screenshot, I have, items that start with 0, dot, whatever number is a company-wide or department information. And then I have broken it down by job duties. So, 1 point whatever is going to be analyst information, and 2 point whatever is going to be cash applications, and go down the process. And even those managerial tasks, some of the stuff is confidential, but a lot of it can be done by other people when you're out of the office. And so that information that is able to be shared should be documented and then laid out. So again, this is just an example of how you could do it. So, 1.7 is going to be, how to pull an aging. So if somebody was needing to learn how to pull an aging, they could go here, click on it, and it's going to open up that SOP or how-to guide to be able to then process it. Versus if somebody's processing a payment, they would go to the 2.8 or whatever you have done. So that's one way to do the naming convention. Or you could use word order. So then you're going to decide whether the name you're processing is either starts with a verb or a noun first. So talk about going back in school and thinking, and it's amazing how this can be wrong for so many people, especially for lots of layers of people involved in creating it. So create an invoice has the verb first, whereas invoice creation starts with a noun. And so it's a little bit more technical to use word orders. Again, these are just 2 examples. I'm sure there's a million different ways to be able to put it together. Just decide on what makes the most sense for your company, and then work off of that naming convention. And then kind of diving in a little bit more on the policy owner. So who should make the corrections when there's an update that needs to be done? Should it only be the department heads, or can anyone make the changes? Again, having that process in place that stipulates the regulations. Otherwise, you may lose the standardization that you're trying to build with putting together these how-to guides. So if you don't have some structure behind who is responsible for doing it, and it's just open and anybody can go rogue and go in there and change anything, maybe that's how it works for your company and that structure works well. If you're in a really large credit department, you may not want that many hands touching it. So thinking through what that process looks like and what's the most efficient way to do that. You don't want one person to necessarily be in charge, because potentially that could be difficult for that person then to maintain their regular job duties, but also have to go in and constantly update the how-to guides. So think through that process. I see a question I see a bubble in the chat. Is there a question, Lori, that we need to pause on?
Sorry, got to get off mute. No, I was actually asking everyone a question.
Okay, perfect. So we're kind of done with the first section, and now we're going to deep dive into the onboarding and cross-training, which tends to be an area where a lot of people find the most value. This seems to be the area that's more loose in most companies as far as having a structured process in place. So again, we can't really show hands on who uses training guides and already has them in place, but I can say from previous experiences, it's usually about 25% of people have some sort of documented structure process in place versus the others are just kind of winging it with, these are the things that we need to teach somebody, and that's what goes through. I will say, though, having a process in place definitely helps in benefiting your onboarding structure. So using an onboarding structure, sorry, I totally lost my train of thought. Using an onboarding structure has positive effects. So this is a article that I came across that talked about, the positive use. So according to a survey that was conducted, employees are more engaged about 49% of the time. They're more confident in their abilities, 46%. They have a lower employee turnover, 31%. And I mean, I don't know about you, but hands down, like if my putting together an onboarding process can then limit the amount of turnover that I have in my company that takes away from me doing my day-to-day job or my team doing their day-to-day job because we're constantly training, like sign me up. I'm there for it. You find greater efficiencies. There's higher productivity, higher morale. I mean, all positive markers that just by having this structure in place really helps to set your new employees and your existing employees up for success. I mean, you can do an overview on once you have an onboarding process in place and just kind of, shore up your team to make sure that everybody's following the process the same way and everybody is using the programs the same way. And again, you don't have people that are going rogue going, oh, well, I always do it this way, when that's really not the way that the company has decided they want it to be done. So creating a training checklist, create your purpose and overviews, definitions, and then kind of do your step-by-step. So in this screenshot here, we can see this is an onboarding checklist that I've created for an analyst to come on. And I use Excel. I think Excel is a great program that utilizes, has a lot of capabilities to be able to kind of put a lot of data in there and massage the data that makes the most sense for you. So I have it broken down into different tabs. So I have notes on, just kind of the breakdown of what it looks like. And then I have it broken down by each job title and what information I want my new employee to learn in the first 30 days. What is critical for them to be successful in their role for those first 30 days? It's building that consistency that everybody's trained the same way. Red flags could then be identified a little bit sooner, and you can either work on coaching or retraining the person, or it may be determined that they're not the right fit. And not that I am an advocate for, going through an entire hiring process, bringing somebody on, and then, 3 days later go, no, I chose wrong. This isn't actually a good fit. It does help in catching those off chances that happens, because it does. We're all human, and some people can interview really well and their performance does not sustain the same ability that it was dictated in the interview. So this really helps to negate kind of keeping somebody on too long. Or on the flip side, the positive side of it, it also can accelerate if somebody's accelerating in this onboarding process. I mean, perhaps they can take on additional tasks sooner than maybe the first 30 days. And you have, that diamond that came your way, which is always pleasurable to have. So for us, we have our checklist. What do we want our employees to know? Well, I want them to read our vision and our mission statement. I want them to understand our culture. They need to know, our branch locations, et cetera, et cetera. And so those are all my zeros, because those are all just common information that the entire department needs to have. But for my analyst, they all start with 1. So then I go through my file and I pull out all of the SOPs or how-to guides that then I want them to learn within the first 30 days, important for them to be able to be successful in their roles. And then we have all of that. I like to print all of it so that they have a paper copy of it. Again, they'll have access to where the data is stored online, but for their first day, having a pamphlet with all of the data in it that they're able to then take their own notes helps to just set them up for success, because people learn in such a variety of ways. And so I try to touch all of the areas that people learn. So then we're just kind of breaking down a little bit more on the onboarding template. So this would be like the first section for the notes and really kind of what the user is going to get out of it. So, you know, the hiring managers, stuff for the employee, you know, the defined steps of kind of what the instructions are for completing the onboarding tracking sheet. And this is what it looks like. It's a lot of information. And if anybody is in the process of actually redoing their process or are starting out, I do have a sample of this in Excel that I'm willing to share if you reach out to me and let me know. Any of the screenshots that I shared in this template, please reach out to me if you're interested in it and I can show it to you. I'm a firm believer that we don't need to recreate the wheel, right? That's not necessarily going to help us with our efficiencies, and why not take something, mold it to what we need it to be and move on from it. And I'm not saying that this is the best way, but it is a good way, and it's benefited me in my career in bringing this into the roles that I've stepped into and creating those efficiencies within the companies that I've worked for. So this section is really kind of the for manager section, and what needs to happen when I decide it's time to bring on another employee. And so we have our pre-acceptance checklist, all of the things that need to happen, and then who's in charge of doing it, and then the status. Is it not started? Is it in progress, or is it completed? Again, just a checklist for me to be able to track the deliverable and make sure that I'm on task to make sure that I'm able to bring somebody in within the timelines that I'm trying to hire somebody. And then what needs to happen once they're hired, and what is that pre-arrival looks like? You know, do they need access to the VPN? Do they need a laptop assigned to them? Are they a hybrid employee? Are they just working in the office? What does that look like? And then who's responsible? Is it something that I need to manage? Is it something that IT needs to manage? Is it something that HR needs to manage? That sort of thing. Then just kind of moving on. So, so the first screenshot that we looked at was the instructions. And then the second one was for the managers. And then this is the employee. So this is like the meat and potatoes of the employee's training guide, if you will. So this is the information that they need to learn in the first 30 days. This section here that I have blank is really the date. So for me, I've decided what is important for them to know on day 1, day 2, day 3, and so forth until I get to day 30. And so those dates are plugged in for the business days worked, and they train on what that looks like with whoever their trainer is. We use our senior analysts to do most of the training, although there are some things that as the manager, I want to be able to sit with them and talk through some of the process with it. At any rate, they're going to go through the same step here, and every day we're going to have a check-in to see if the stuff that's supposed to be done on that due date is done and how they're feeling about it, and just kind of walk them through that process. So I know there's a lot of information here. Again, if you want some help in creating this, just let me know. Are there any questions before we jump into cross-training?
No, we've just had a couple people make some comments. I had asked if anyone had the situation where that someone interviewed well but couldn't manage the position, and one person answered yes several times. And then talking about onboarding and cross-training, Nicole did say that they have separate policies for separate functions, and also have a training guide for new hires that covers the basics as well, just not as detailed as the SOPs.
Oh, perfect.
So, yeah.
Good information. Okay, so cross training, why is it so important? Well, it promotes teamwork and achievement. It enhances customer service. It creates consistency. It solves coverage problem, right? You are more likely to allow people to take PTO. Like the worst thing for me is for somebody to come and ask for time off, and I'm like, oh, we don't have the coverage, so sorry, no, you can't, go to your grandma's, whatever. I would say basketball game, but probably a grandma playing basketball maybe is not happening. But whatever the situation is, like you don't want to say no to people who work hard and you want them to be able to take the time off. And so having cross training in place then definitely helps with solving those coverage problems. It also increases skills learned, which can then be an organic way of grooming that employee for potential growth, promotions, additional responsibilities, that sort of thing. It boosts motivation. People are excited to learn new things, and that's why you're all on here today, right? You're hoping to walk away with some little nugget of information that's going to help you make your job a little bit easier moving forward. It also increases productivity. Trained employees can step in whenever needed. You have a solid SOP process in place with all your how-to guides on how to do something. Even if somebody isn't completely cross-trained in how to do a function, if you have those first steps done, anybody can step in and kind of help and take on that human element where it needed to be able to get that workflow done. So we create we call it our OOO. So it's our out of office guide. And really what we're doing is defining the job duties for each individual within the department. It allows the backup to know what needs to be done and then provides the instructions on the how-to guide and where to find the material that is needed to get through that task. And then once we have like the initial backup trained, then we do a third deep backup so that there's a backup of the backup that doesn't do it very often. I recommend that if you're doing that, that you try to have somebody do that task, especially if they're kind of the third tier, maybe, once every few months, just so that they can keep it tangible and kind of get some of that muscle memory to come in. But again, that's the reason we have the SOPs in place to be able to step in and handle some of those. So the way we've structured the breakdown is we have a daily breakdown. So the formatting is exactly the same. And then just really kind of the sections are broken down by daily. So what needs to be done daily? And okay, in this particular case, it's an aging needs to be done, and it needs to be broken down in all these colors with all these different things. You can see in here there's different training manuals or how-to guides on how to be able to get through some of those. Master aging needs to be done. Oh, this is done every Tuesday. So on your daily, you have what's done daily, and then we break it down by the days of the week. And again, you don't put the details of how to do it. You navigate them to wherever that document lives. That just tells them high level kind of what needs to be done on that day, and then breaking it down monthly. Whoops, I didn't mean to jump that far. Dropping it down monthly, what needs to be done on a monthly basis, what needs to be done annually, semi-annually, annually, whatever. Maybe something is done every 2 years. Those are the things that you do. And you don't need to put tasks in there like make collection calls or whatever. Like that's just a given. It's just things that are above and beyond. And like, how do you make collection calls? Do you run an aging every day? Do you run an aging once a week? That type of detail is what you want to put in there. And then if you have any customers that have special billing requirements, that sort of thing, you would want to document when do those special billings get done. And then again, where does that data live for it? So rambled through this quite quickly, but are there any questions?
We do have one question that showed up. They said, does the backup person ever find this confusing? Do people follow this well, or do they have to ask questions as they're going through it?
Yeah, so I mean, in the beginning, it can be confusing, especially if you have somebody new that has come on and they've just learned how to kind of navigate through your SOP, and then now all of a sudden they're needing to learn how to back up whoever their backup is. There can be a little bit of confusion. And, I feel like I have a really good team here, and everybody jumps in and helps one another and answers questions. So it's not like you can only talk to this person or you can only talk to that person. It's very open and communal in helping people navigate through it. And so we have found that for some of our most complex tasks that need to be done, the backup and the backup of the backup, having them in cycles of being able to go in and do those tasks just help them, because some of the tasks that have to be done are really difficult tasks and have a lot of steps to it, and we want to make sure that people feel comfortable in doing it. So this doesn't happen overnight. This is the long game here in building this up, and it does take time. I would say I've been with Carson for 4 years now, and I would say that it took a good solid 2.5 years to put together this process here. This is a format that I've used at a couple other companies that I've worked at, and I brought that same concept here. And so it was really from the ground up here. There was no process in place. There was no policy in place. We had nothing. The credit department was rogue, if you will, and it was just kind of, that's the way we do it. And so this has been a ground up build, and it's been a slow process. I mean, again, at least 2.5 years of kind of putting this together, and it's still not perfect, right? We're still working through different things. Different companies have different requirements, and it's switching different industries. I mean, all of that kind of plays into how long it takes to put something together.
So another question, how long did it take you to put this together, the first time you did it?
So So the idea was built in my head and getting it onto paper and then doing it. I would say it took me 6 months to have a loose format of it, right? There were still holes of like, oh, we need to write these SOPs, but the core business module was done in about 6 months time. And it was not my sole dedication to only work on that, right? So I had other tasks that needed to be done, but I did put some good time into this process. Again, I was hired though to come in and build a process for this company. And so, I think 6 months was the first time I did it, was probably my main, about 6 months.
The detail's really impressive. We do have another question. How often do you suggest the credit department review or reevaluate credit applications or customer contracts? 5 years, 10 years?
So it depends on the industry that you're in. So I would say, being that most of my career is in construction, those numbers are a little bit longer on when you review things because contracts tend to last for multiple years. Being in the fuel industry, everything's short. So once a year, some of these contracts are expiring and need to be reviewed. But the credit application, so we're tiered. Our credit policy is written that we're tiered on when we review people for credits increases, or just do like a review of the account. So some customers are reviewed depending on their dollar limit every 5 years, some are every 2 years, and some are every year. Within that, as our documentation becomes aged out, we will start to broach the conversation with the customer to get an updated credit application. And in some industries, it's super easy to get people to just sign a new credit application and move forth. I would say in construction, it's easy peasy, like it's done deal. Like they just do it. It's not a problem. In the fuel industry, you are basically offending your customer by asking for it. So it's very delicate conversations that are had to try and get the customers to buy into giving us that updated data.
So a follow-up on that, what would you suggest for the trucking industry or the tires?
So I was in trucking, and I would say that trucking is, is almost as sensitive as fuel, but not quite. So I would say probably every 2 years would make sense. And again, if you learn that the customer has any kind of structure changed within their business, they change their business entity type from an LLC to a corporation, or from an individual to, whatever other entity, LLC or whatever, then that's your shoe-in, right? To be like, oh, changed your business status, like we need it. Or if there's any kind of ownership or structure change within the organization, then that's a great segue to be able to say, oh, okay, you're having these changes. We need to update, just formality. We just need to update this information, and then you're getting updated data. The caveat is if you ask for personal guarantees, you want to be careful about going and asking for an updated credit application, because you may not get the guarantee. And then you have the fight to say, well, you guaranteed it before. And they come back and said, well, that was 15 years ago when the business was brand new. I've proven myself as a customer. Why are you asking me to do this again? And then that can get a little sticky. So I would err on the caution of that piece. It's hard to predict how the customer is going to be responding to your request. Sometimes you think, oh man, this is going to be bad, and then it's the easiest transition, and then the people that you think are going to be easy, it becomes the most explosive situation, and you're just sitting there going, like, what just happened here? But so for trucking, I would say probably every 2 years or so.
Well, and you read her mind. She said that was her next question on the personal guarantees. So good job on that.
Perfect.
While we wait and see if anybody else has another question, I do want to let you know that we do have another webinar tomorrow with Chris Satera on the Chapter 11, Subchapter 5 bankruptcy. I know a lot of people still haven't heard about that, so it'll be a great webinar just to get some of the simpler information in regards to it. Just to check again, does anyone have any more questions for Alaina? Looks like we're good. Alaina will be providing the slides for this presentation. We will be doing the recording, and then contact information will be in the email as well. So if you do want to contact her directly, she definitely loves talking about this and sharing and making sure you don't have to recreate the wheel, as she says it. This is my contact information. You can go on any social site and just look up credittalkwithlori.com, or on LinkedIn, look up Building Blocks. Follow that, and you'll be sure to know about all these webinars like this and any other networking or educational events that we have going. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. And Alaina, thank you again. It's always such great information that you give out, and the fact that you're willing to share that information with everybody is very much appreciated.
Thank you. It was my pleasure being here.
We hope you have a great afternoon, and we will see you next time.